Welcome to the Morning Edition Extra. I'm Adelmi Ruiz coming to you from the digital desk this Friday morning. Starting off this morning, powerful winds and surging waves slammed western Alaska, leaving homes damaged and forcing families to flee. Our Alaska's News Source meteorologists have been closely following these storms. Here's Aaron Morrison with what you need to know. Aaron.
Well, thanks, Adelmi. We are seeing kind of a break in the action before that next storm system arrives as we welcome in the weekend. And with things kind of quieting down, we are seeing the return to some cooler weather across portions of the state where we are waking up to some rain and snow through portions of the interior out towards the slope. We've got some ongoing light snow. Rain already building into the Aleutians, but the storm system we're watching, there is Typhoon Halong right there, or the remnants of it, well south of the western Aleutians. And then we've got a Kamchatka low, which remains fairly weak or continues to weaken and will, for the most part, remain in the western Aleutians. Now, the area of low pressure or the remnants of that typhoon will wrap around that low and build into the Aleutians as well as areas of the Bering Sea and western Alaska as we welcome in the weekend. As it does that, we are going to see increasing winds once again around some strong, some rough seas as well as some storm surge looking likely, which could top out near 15 feet in some areas. So we've got a ridge of high pressure out over the northern Pacific Ocean, southern Gulf of Alaska. There's our Kamchatka low. So this remnants of this typhoon is going to ride right along this jet stream. It's going to build, find that weak spot, and then build into the central and eastern Aleutians as we welcome in the weekend. So we're going to begin to see those winds increasing overnight into tomorrow. So there's the remnants of that typhoon. As it builds to the northeast, it will continue to weaken, but then re-strengthen as it builds into the Aleutians and southwest Alaska. Notice these winds will be quite gusty through areas of the eastern Bering Sea out towards southwest Alaska, the Yukon Delta, and then eventually into the Seward Peninsula as well as Norton Sound. This is where we could see some of those stronger storm surge events that will be likely with this next round of storm that's going to build into western Alaska. Now, one thing we are going to see with this storm system, this most recent storm brought some of the greatest impacts across areas north of the Seward Peninsula. We're not going to see the greatest impacts with this storm system in the same areas. It's going to be more to the south. With that said, we will still see some storm surge for areas from Kotzebue out towards Point Hope. We've got coastal flood watches that remain in effect across all of western Alaska from Sunday on into Monday. And when it comes to just what we're going to see when it comes to this storm surge, initially those water levels are actually going to recede and drop even more as that storm system begins to build into the Bering Sea. And then once it builds northward and begins to impact these communities, that's when that storm surge will build inland. So we're talking about areas of southwest Alaska. Could see storm surge of 5 to 15 feet. Nome, 6 to 11 feet. Out towards Kotzebue, 2 to 6 foot storm surge looks possible, but even with that being the case, we're still going to see that potential for major flooding looking likely out towards Kotzebue Sound. And then as you head out towards Point Hope and areas to the north, we could see water levels about 1 to 7 feet above the normal high tide. So now is the time to prepare for this event. Go ahead and secure objects. Make sure that you have any important documentation locked away. You can see for today, we're just going to see some impacts of some gusty winds and some rain. We're going to really see the impacts from the storm system arriving as we welcome in our Sunday on into Monday with the highest water levels to be expected during that time period. So there's that storm system building inland or at least into the Aleutians as we welcome in the overnight hours on into our Saturday. By mid-morning, you can see widespread heavy rain building through the Aleutians that will build northward into southwest Alaska. This is when we can expect to see that storm surge event taking place across western and southwest Alaska. We could even see some more snow to be expected across western parts of the Brooks Range. So that's what we're going to be seeing when it comes to this storm system for areas of western Alaska. Here across south central, our biggest concern with it really is going to be some rain that's going to build back in across the south central as we welcome in our Saturday on into Sunday with widespread rain looking likely as we welcome in your Sunday. So we'll be watching for that this weekend. Temperatures staying on the cooler side, and then we warm back down or back into the upper 40s and lower 50s as we welcome in next week with more rain to be expected. Adelmi?
All right, thank you so much, Aaron. Governor Mike Dunleavy issued a disaster declaration for the West Coast to put into motion programs for residents needing help. The State Emergency Operations Center has requested the support of the Alaska Militia, which includes the Alaska National Guard and State Defense Force, to assist with response and recovery efforts. The disaster declaration for Western Alaska is intended to aid in recovery after Wednesday's storm, as well as prepare for the storm headed towards the coast this weekend. So far, no injuries have reported in the wake of the storm, but communities are continuing to assess the damage and determine the cost. The state's public assistance program has been opened up, designed to help communities restore critical infrastructure damaged by the disaster. The Alaska National Guard also confirms they are currently gearing up to deploy to Kotzebue today, expecting to provide shelter, disaster supplies, and aid in assessing the damage and removing debris. It was around this time last year that the Western Coast faced similar flooding and storms, which some residents said helped them prepare for this last storm and the one still ahead.
It just goes to show how strong we can be when we all pitch in, and we're focused on bouncing back from challenges and making sure Kotzebue is safer and more prepared, for any flooding that might come our way in the future.
We've had many residents already put some of their property and valuable stuff to higher ground, so we've kind of announced that if you would like to return that property back to your home property, you're more than welcome to, but just keep in mind that we might have another surge coming.
As staying informed right now is critical. Our weather app has 24/7 updated coverage at your fingertips from the Alaska's Weather Source team. Just search for it on the App Store. You can also sign up for alerts at alaskasnewssource.com that will give you up-to-the-minute updates on Alaska's news and weather. A Wasilla man accused in the connection of a teen girl's death has pleaded guilty in federal courts to distributing a deadly synthetic opioid. Prosecutors say Sean Mobley admitted to giving carfentanil to 16-year-old Elena Tonis in November. The drug is said to be 100 times stronger than fentanyl and 10,000 times more potent than morphine. Court documents say after Tonis overdosed and lost consciousness, Mobley believed she had died and dumped her body near a power line trail in Wasilla. Troopers found her body the next morning. Mobley faces a minimum of 20 years in prison and up to life when he's sentenced in January. He also faces state charges, including second-degree murder. A change of plea and sentencing hearing for that case is also scheduled for January. And as the government shutdown moves into its 10th day, it's now beginning to affect the paychecks of federal workers. For many, today's paychecks will be smaller, and they'll be the last checks until Congress agrees on a spending package for the current fiscal year. It gets worse next week as military personnel will miss their first paycheck on October 15th. That hasn't happened before. Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski is calling for more bipartisan conversations as a way to move past the shutdown and reopen the government.
We do need to get the government open. I think we would all agree to that. We've got some timelines that are coming upon us very fast, where people are going to feel this real time when it comes to their pay or not receiving their pay. And every day that we do not have an answer to this is more stressful to a lot of people. I'm one who always says, you cannot go wrong by having more conversation.
And meanwhile, despite the shutdown, Alaska's News Source has learned thousands of Alaskans will keep getting their food assistance, at least for now. Political reporter Will Courtney explains.
Hi there, this is Will Courtney with Alaska's News Source. We've been following the impacts of the government shutdown, specifically on some of these federal programs and their impacts in Alaska. One of those programs we've been watching is WIC. It stands for Women, Infants, and Children, and it's a supplemental nutrition program. It specifically is able to provide food benefits, nutrition, education, and breastfeeding support for people who are eligible. Now, it's actually set to lose all of its funding because of the government shutdown within the next 2 weeks. That's actually been pushed down the road until the end of October. That's because the USDA is allocating $300 million for the program. That's confirmed by Senator Lisa Murkowski's office. So as part of our reporting today, we wanted to see what role WIC plays in Alaska. Here's what I heard from several healthcare leaders around the state.
We're in an economy right now that is, between paying for rent or paying for a mortgage, paying for your bills, there's not a lot left over, for those essential items like, fruits and vegetables and, those good meats and things that we have to keep us going. And so WIC is a program that kind of steps in and helps with those things.
So WIC is the second program to receive funding this week after the funding was threatened by the government shutdown. For more information, including what the state will do if funding isn't enough, you can make sure to visit our website and our mobile app for more information.
And political reporter Will Courtney also spoke with Alaska's news source Washington correspondent Emma Wolfhurst on national headlines straight from D.C.
On Thursday, a grand jury indicted New York Attorney General Letitia James on a fraud charge. Emma Wolfhurst, our Washington correspondent, joins us from D.C. Emma, what can you tell us about this?
Will, James was indicted in the Eastern District of Virginia on one count related to a mortgage fraud investigation, which began back in May, and that's tied to the 2020 purchase of a home by her in Norfolk. She is a longtime target of President Trump. She won the civil fraud case against Trump and his company in New York. And this indictment comes just 2 weeks after a separate criminal case against former FBI Director James Comey. James's indictment is really the latest in the Trump administration's attempt to use the Justice Department to prosecute the president's perceived political enemies. We are getting reaction from Letitia James in a statement. She called the indictment nothing more than a continuation of the president's desperate weaponization of our justice system, end quote. Her attorney has said that she is innocent and these charges are ridiculous. We know now her first court appearance is scheduled in Virginia for October 24th. Well,
Emma, Israel and Hamas are on the threshold of a historic peace deal. Walk us through this first phase. What details have we learned so far?
Thursday evening, the Israeli government approved the ceasefire and framework for the release of all the hostages. And President Trump has said those hostages will begin to be released Monday or Tuesday of next week. However, this deal is still on a little bit of shaky ground. There are a lot of moving parts here, right? And Thursday, Hamas criticized Israel for an airstrike in Gaza City. Medics there say at least 2 people were killed and dozens more were injured. And again, as you said, this is only the first phase of this peace deal. We still don't know any details about whether Hamas will really demilitarize or what the eventual governance of the territory might look like. The Egyptian president also invited President Trump. Egypt is where these peace talks have taken place this week, and President Trump again indicated Thursday he would travel to the Middle East very soon, so a lot could be happening over the weekend.
And President Trump held a cabinet meeting today talking about that Israel and Hamas deal. What else was discussed at that meeting?
Well, there were quite a few topics mentioned, obviously, Will, as you said. A lot of stuff going on here this week. The president talked mainly about the Israel-Hamas deal, but he also mentioned what he said before, that he settled 7 different wars, and he once again made some claims about vaccines. He asserted babies are given 82 vaccines in a single shot. He talked about Amish people not taking vaccines or pills. We also heard more from Health Secretary RFK Jr., who continued to link autism to Tylenol use, and Thursday took it a step further, citing a few studies that there is a link between babies who are circumcised and autism diagnoses. Trump also discussed the alleged Venezuelan drug boats and mentioned he was the rightful winner of the 2020 election. So despite all those topics, though, that cabinet meeting Thursday kept pretty short, as the president said he needed to go and discuss more about the Israel-Hamas deal.
And day 9 of the government shutdown. Are lawmakers any closer to passing the funding bill?
Not really, Will. Day 9 saw back-to-back unsuccessful votes in the Senate. This was the 7th time these nearly identical stopgap funding bills failed. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, though, did suggest Thursday the promise of a vote on health care subsidies could be an off-ramp to end the shutdown. Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine said she is committed to introducing a bill to address those expiring tax credits as soon as the lights come back on. Democrats, though, want that health care funding tied up and any sort of continuing resolution for funding. So that's really the big break between Democrats and Republicans there. Those Affordable Care Act subsidies are set to expire at the end of this year. Well,
our Washington correspondent Emma Wolford, thanks for joining us tonight.
And learning about democracy and civic duty, students across the Fairbanks School District practiced voting in a mock election Monday. More than 2,000 students took part in the kids voting program, many of them during their history classes. They cast anonymous electronic ballots in the races for borough assembly and the school board. Some of these young voters have been participating in these events since since elementary school, excuse me.
I just pick up information online. It's easy to find information. I don't really understand why voting polls are so low, because information is easy to find.
Looking up what they think and what they will do to improve our school recently, and I think most of them have, but most of them don't answer how they are actually going to.
It gives kind of a basis of understanding of how the system's going to work, how the ballots work, how voting works, registration. We got a little bit of information on that.
The results released Wednesday showed some sharp differences from the unofficial election results from the borough so far, with candidates Barbara Haney, Melissa Burnett, and Sam Spencer taking leads in the student vote. Turning to some lighter news, maybe even lighter than air, this may take a little see to believe power, but check this out. At a nature preserve in Long Island, New York, an injured monarch butterfly was brought in. The wing was damaged and the butterfly was unable to fly. Using a wing from a deceased monarch butterfly, they were able to remove the damaged wing and attach somehow a new wing. The transplant was a success and the butterfly flew away after to resume their migration. And another case of a moose on the loose. This fellow found itself in a tough situation, but luckily officers came to the rescue. Colorado Parks and Wildlife officers responded to a trapped bull moose in a canal. Bureau of Reclamation crews arrived on scene earlier and had strapped the moose's antlers to a fence to keep its head above water. CPW officers sedated the moose with a tranquilizer so they could work on freeing the animal. Once it was asleep, officers used a crane to lift the moose out of the water. The moose was in good body condition. Officers administered the wake-up drug and observed the moose. It was exhausted, but eventually it was able to stand on its own. The rescue took about 2 hours total. And that wraps up the Morning Edition Extra for this Friday morning. Thank you for joining me this morning. I'll see you again Monday morning for another edition, and have a wonderful rest of your day and a happy weekend.